Story 1. The Loop at mile marker 247. Derek Hammond had been driving cross-country routes for 11 years, and in all that time, he'd never felt genuine fear on the road. The loneliness, sure. The exhaustion, absolutely. But fear, that was something he'd left behind in his rookie days. On the night of September 14th, 2019, everything changed on a stretch of Interstate 80 through the Nevada desert. He pulled into the rest stop at mile marker 247 around 2:30 a.m. It was one of those minimal facilities, just restrooms, vending machines, and a few picnic tables under flickering sodium lights. The parking lot was empty except for his rig and a white sedan parked at an odd angle near the far edge. Derek noticed the sedan's driver's door was open, dome light still on, but he didn't see anyone around. After 11 years, you learn not to involve yourself in other people's business on the road. The restroom was standard issue, cracked tiles, the smell of industrial cleaner barely masking something worse, a mirror with a corner missing. Derek washed his hands, splashed water on his face, and checked his phone. No signal, which wasn't surprising out here. He grabbed a coffee from the vending machine, his third of the night, and headed back to his truck. That's when he noticed something strange. The white sedan was gone. In its place, at the exact same angle, was his truck. Derek stopped walking. He looked at the truck he was approaching, then turned around. His actual truck was parked behind him, right where he'd left it. But ahead of him, maybe 50 yards away, was an identical Peterbilt with the same company logo, the same dent on the passenger door from a loading dock incident in Tulsa, the same air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror that he could somehow see from this distance. He walked toward the duplicate truck. With each step, a coldness settled into his bones that had nothing to do with the desert night. When he was about 20 feet away, he saw someone sitting in the driver's seat, someone wearing the same red flannel shirt he had on, someone with the same thick beard and the same scar above the right eyebrow from a childhood bicycle accident. The figure turned and looked at him. It was his face, but wrong somehow. The eyes were too dark, the smile too wide. The other Derek raised a hand and waved slowly, mockingly. Derek ran back to his truck, his real truck, fumbling with his keys. His hands shook so badly that he dropped them twice before managing to unlock the door. He climbed in, started the engine, and pulled out of the rest stop without looking back. His CB radio crackled to life, even though he hadn't turned it on. "You can't leave," said a voice. His voice. "You're still here." Derek pushed the accelerator down, his rig picking up speed as he merged back onto the interstate. He watched the rest stop shrink in his mirrors, the lights becoming smaller dots in the vast darkness. His heart was hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. He drove for what felt like 30 minutes, putting miles between himself and that place. Then he saw the sign, "Rest stop 1 mile. Mile marker 247. "No," Derek said aloud. "No, no, no." But there it was ahead, the same rest stop, the same flickering sodium lights. And parked at an angle in the lot was his Peterbilt. He could see himself standing next to the vending machine, coffee in hand, looking confused. Derek didn't slow down. He kept driving, foot pressing harder on the accelerator. The speedometer climbed past 80. He watched in his side mirror as the rest stop fell behind. He counted the mile markers as they passed. 248, 249, 250. His breath started to come easier. At mile marker 260, he saw the sign again. "Rest stop 1 mile. Mile marker 247. This time, there were 2 of his trucks in the parking lot. 2 versions of himself, standing and talking to each other, both looking toward the interstate as if waiting for him. This isn't real, Derek told himself. I'm asleep. I fell asleep at the wheel. He pinched his arm hard enough to leave a mark. The pain was sharp and immediate. The CB radio crackled again. Not his voice this time, but static that formed words. Stop. Running. Accept. The loop. Derek drove for hours. Each time, without fail, he would see the rest stop again. Each time, there would be another truck, another version of himself. By the fifth loop, there were 5 trucks arranged in a semicircle. 5 Dereks standing together, all watching the road. By the 10th loop, the parking lot was nearly full. A fleet of identical Peterbilts, dozens of versions of himself. He tried getting off the interstate. Every exit ramp curved back and merged into the same road, leading inevitably to mile marker 247. He tried driving in reverse. The mile markers counted backward until they reached 247, and there was the rest stop again, now behind him. The sun never rose. The clock on his dashboard had stopped at 2:43 a.m. On what he thought might be the 20th loop, he'd lost count. Derek finally pulled into the rest stop. He was exhausted, crying, defeated. The parking lot was packed with his trucks now, hundreds of them stretching back into an impossible distance that the rest stop shouldn't have been able to contain. As he stepped out of his cab, the other Dereks turned to look at him. They didn't speak. They just nodded, a collective gesture of grim understanding, and returned to what they were doing. Some standing and staring at nothing. Some sitting at the picnic tables with their heads in their hands. Some walking in tight circles. How long? Derek asked the nearest version of himself, one whose beard was longer, whose eyes were hollowed out with exhaustion. Time doesn't work right here, the other Derek said. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been screaming. Could be years, could be forever. We all stopped at 2:30 a.m. We all thought we'd leave. But the loop always brings you back. Derek looked at the restroom building. The door was open, and inside, he could see more of himself. Infinite reflections in mirrors that shouldn't have been able to create that effect. Each one showing a different expression. Terror, resignation, madness. There has to be a way out, Derek said. The older version of himself laughed bitterly. Everyone thinks that. At first, you'll learn. We all do. The loop doesn't end. It just accumulates us. Derek ran back to his truck. He would find a way. He would break the pattern. He drove and drove. But now he could see them in his mirrors. All the other Dereks, standing in the bed of his truck, clinging to the sides of his cab, pressing their faces against his windows. Their mouths moved in unison. You're still here. You'll always be here. The interstate stretched ahead, and in the distance, he could already see the sign. Rest, stop 1 mile. Mile marker, 247. Derek Hammond still drives that loop. Somewhere in the Nevada desert, on a stretch of Interstate 80 that maps show but GPS systems can never quite find, there's a rest stop that exists in a moment, frozen at 2:43 a.m. And if you stop there, if you park your vehicle and step out into that flickering sodium light, you might see them. Hundreds of identical trucks arranged in impossible geometric patterns, and hundreds of identical men, all wearing red flannel shirts, all with the same scar above their right eyebrow, all looking at you with hollow eyes that have seen the same 30 minutes repeat for an eternity. Derek's family reported him missing on September 15th, 2019. His truck was found abandoned at a rest stop on Interstate 80, mile marker 247. The engine was still running. His coffee was still warm. But Derek Hammond was gone, lost somewhere in a loop that never ends, accumulating versions of himself like drops of water filling an infinite bucket. Sometimes, truckers who stop there report seeing movement in their mirrors that doesn't match their actions. Sometimes they hear a voice on their CB radio, tired, desperate, warning them not to stop at mile marker 247. But the voice is always too late. If you've already stopped, you're already in the loop. And the loop never lets go. Story 2. The Midnight Passenger. Maria Vasquez had been a long-haul trucker for 7 years, specializing in late-night runs between Chicago and Denver. She preferred the night shift, less traffic, cooler temperatures, and a certain peacefulness that came with having the road mostly to herself. On March 3rd, 2021, she picked up what should have been a routine load of restaurant equipment and began her westbound journey on Interstate 80. Around midnight, somewhere in the farmland between Des Moines and Omaha, Maria pulled into a rest stop to use the facilities and check her cargo straps. The rest stop was nearly deserted. Just her rig, a couple of RVs at the far end, and a small blue Honda Civic parked sideways across 2 spaces near the restrooms. The temperature had dropped into the low 30s, and her breath created clouds in the air as she walked to the restroom. She noticed the Civic's engine was off, windows slightly fogged. Someone was probably sleeping inside, trying to save money on a hotel. Maria had done the same thing in her younger, broker days. The restroom was cleaner than most, recently renovated, with automatic lights and those high-powered hand dryers. Maria was washing her hands when she heard footsteps behind her. She looked in the mirror and saw a woman standing by the door, late 20s, maybe early 30s, wearing a blue dress that seemed too thin for the weather. Her hair was wet, plastered to her head and shoulders. Water dripped from her clothes onto the tile floor. "Excuse me," the woman said. Her voice was soft, almost musical. "My car broke down. Could you possibly give me a ride to the next town?" Maria's instincts told her something was wrong. The woman's car wasn't broken down. It was parked perfectly fine outside. And why was she soaking wet when it hadn't rained in days? "I don't take passengers," Maria said carefully. "Company policy. But I can call a tow truck for you if you want." "Please," the woman said, and her eyes filled with tears that somehow looked different from the water dripping from her hair. "I need to get to North Platte. It's important. I'll pay you. I have money." Against her better judgment, against 7 years of following her gut instincts, Maria agreed. Maybe it was the desperation in the woman's voice. Maybe it was the memory of times when she'd needed help, and strangers had offered it. Whatever the reason, she walked with the woman back to her truck. "I'm Maria," she said as they approached her rig. "Rebecca," the woman replied. "Thank you so much. You don't know what this means." Maria opened the passenger door, and Rebecca climbed in. Up close, Maria could smell lake water, that distinctive scent of algae and mud. Rebecca must have fallen into a pond or something. But when Maria asked if she needed a towel or a blanket, Rebecca just shook her head. "I'm fine," she said. "I just need to get to North Platte." They pulled back onto the interstate. Maria tried to make conversation, but Rebecca mostly stared out the window at the dark farmland passing by. Every so often she would whisper something under her breath, words Maria couldn't quite make out. After about 20 minutes, Maria glanced over and noticed something disturbing. The puddle of water under Rebecca's feet wasn't evaporating or soaking into the floor mat. It was growing, spreading across the passenger side floor. And Rebecca's dress, her hair, they were still dripping, as wet as when she'd first gotten in. "Rebecca, are you okay?" Maria asked. "You're still soaking wet." Rebecca turned to look at her, and Maria's blood went cold. The woman's face had changed. Her skin was pale, almost blue-tinted. Her eyes had taken on a milky quality, like cataracts but worse, like the eyes of something that had been underwater for a very long time. "I'm almost home," Rebecca said, her voice now carrying a strange echo, as if she were speaking from inside a tunnel. 22 years. "I'm almost home." Maria's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She wanted to stop, to tell this woman, this thing, to get out. But they were in the middle of nowhere, doing 70 miles an hour on a dark highway. "What are you?" Maria managed to ask. Rebecca smiled, showing teeth that were too white, too perfect. "I drowned in Lake Wanahoo in 1999, March 3rd. I was driving to see my sister in North Platte. Never made it. My car went off the bridge on Route 92. They found my body 3 days later, but they never found my spirit. I've been trying to finish the trip ever since." Maria's throat had gone dry. That's not possible." "Look at your dashboard clock," Rebecca said. Maria looked. The clock read 12:47 a.m., March 3rd, 2021. Exactly 22 years to the day, probably close to the same time as Rebecca's accident. The water on the floor was now ankle-deep and rising. Maria could feel the cold seeping through her boots. The inside of the windshield began to fog up, then frost over, despite the heater running at full blast. "Every year on this night, I wake up," Rebecca continued. Her voice was becoming distorted, gurgling, as if she were speaking from underwater. "I wake up and I try to finish the drive. Sometimes I walk. Sometimes someone picks me up. But I never make it. Something always pulls me back. The lake. It won't let me go." The water was rising faster now, past Maria's ankles, climbing toward her knees. The temperature in the cab had plummeted to near freezing. She could see her breath, could feel ice forming on her eyelashes. "I just want to see my sister," Rebecca said. And now she was crying, real tears mixing with the water streaming down her face. "I just want to tell her I'm sorry I missed her wedding. That's all. That's all I want." The truck began to slow down. Maria's foot was still on the accelerator, but the engine was dying, choked by water that couldn't possibly be flooding the mechanical systems, but somehow was. The steering wheel felt like she was gripping ice. They coasted to a stop on the shoulder. The water inside the cab was chest-high now. Maria was going to drown in her own truck, in the middle of a dry Nebraska night, killed by a ghost who just wanted to apologize to her sister. "I'm sorry," Rebecca whispered. "I'm so sorry. I don't mean to hurt anyone. But the lake is so cold, and I'm so lonely. And I just want—" "North Platte," Maria gasped, fighting to keep her head above water. "What's your sister's address?" Rebecca blinked, seeming confused. "What?" "Give me her address. I'll take you there. I'll make sure you get there." You will?" "Yes," Maria said. "But you have to stop this. You have to let me drive." For a long moment, Rebecca just stared at her. Then, slowly, the water began to recede. It drained away as impossibly fast as it had appeared, disappearing through the floor, through the vents, evaporating into the air. The temperature rose. The ice melted from the windshield. Rebecca gave her an address on Willow Street in North Platte. Maria started the engine. It turned over smoothly, as if nothing had happened, and began driving again. They didn't speak for the next hour. Rebecca stared out the window, her form becoming increasingly translucent. By the time they reached the outskirts of North Platte, Maria could see through her to the passenger door. The address led to a small ranch house with a porch light on. An older woman was visible through the front window, sitting in a chair and reading. "That's her," Rebecca whispered. "That's Susan. She waited up. She always waits up on this night." "What do you want me to tell her?" Maria asked. "Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I loved her dress. Tell her I'm finally at peace." Rebecca reached out and touched Maria's hand. Her fingers were cold but solid, real. "Thank you for finishing my journey. Thank you for giving me peace." Then she was gone. Not fading, not gradually disappearing, just gone, like a light switching off. Maria sat in her truck for a long time, shaking, trying to process what had happened. Finally, she climbed out and walked to the front door. She knocked, and the older woman answered. "Can I help you?" the woman asked. Maria explained haltingly that she had a message from someone named Rebecca. The woman's face went white. "Rebecca was my sister," she said quietly. "She died 22 years ago tonight, drowned in her car. How did you—" "She asked me to tell you she's sorry she missed your wedding, and that she loved your dress, and that she's finally at peace." The woman started crying, covering her mouth with her hand. "I wore blue," she whispered. "I wore a blue dress. We couldn't afford white. Rebecca was the only one who told me I looked beautiful." Maria left the woman there, crying on her porch. She drove her truck to a nearby parking lot and sat there until sunrise, unable to close her eyes, unable to stop shaking. When she finally continued her journey, she found a wet handprint on the passenger door handle, a permanent stain that no amount of cleaning would ever remove. Maria Vasquez still drives the Chicago-Denver route, but she never stops at that rest stop between Des Moines and Omaha. And on every March 3rd, she calls in sick, refusing to drive at all. Some journeys, she learned, transcend death. Some passengers carry debts that span decades, and some ghosts just want one last chance to say goodbye. Story 3. The Backwards Man. Trevor Sullivan was 3 days into a cross-country haul from Seattle to Atlanta when exhaustion finally caught up with him near the Wyoming-Nebraska border. It was 4:17 a.m. on a moonless night in July 2018, and his eyes were burning from staring at the endless white lines of Interstate 80. When he saw the rest stop sign, he almost cried with relief. The facility was basic: a parking lot with room for about a dozen vehicles, a squat concrete building housing restrooms, and 2 outdoor pavilions with picnic tables. Trevor was the only person there, which was how he preferred it. After 14 hours of driving, he craved silence and solitude. He parked his rig, killed the engine, and sat for a moment letting the tension drain from his shoulders. The truck's engine ticked as it cooled. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled. Otherwise, perfect silence. Trevor grabbed his toiletry bag and walked toward the restroom building. The overhead lights were motion-activated, flickering on as he approached. That's when he saw the man. He was standing under one of the pavilions, perfectly still, facing away from Trevor. He wore dark clothing. Trevor couldn't make out the details in the poor light. What struck Trevor as odd was the man's posture. He stood rigidly upright, arms at his sides, head slightly tilted as if listening to something. "Evening," Trevor called out, mostly to be polite. The man didn't respond, didn't move at all. Trevor shrugged and continued to the restroom. Probably just another driver catching a smoke break or talking on his phone. People were weird at 4 a.m. The restroom was cold, the fluorescent lights harsh after the darkness outside. Trevor used the facilities, washed his face and hands, and spent a few minutes splashing cold water on his neck and wrists, trying to wake himself up enough for the next leg of the drive. He had maybe 5 more hours until he hit his mandatory rest period. When he came back outside, the man had moved. He was now standing in the parking lot, about 30 feet from Trevor's truck, still facing away, still in that rigid, unnatural posture. Trevor felt his first flicker of unease. The man had moved at least 40 yards without making any sound. And why was he standing in the middle of the parking lot? "Hey, buddy, you okay?" Trevor called out. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the man began to turn around. But he turned the wrong way. His feet stayed planted, pointing away from Trevor. His legs remained stationary, but his torso rotated, twisting at the waist, turning further than any spine should be able to turn. His shoulders came around, then his neck, his head, until he was facing Trevor, while his feet still pointed in the opposite direction. In the harsh sodium light of the parking lot, Trevor could see the man's face clearly. It was wrong. Not deformed exactly, but backwards. His features seemed inverted, nose turning inward, eyes set too far apart, mouth curving in an upside-down smile. And his eyes reflected the light like an animal's, shining with a yellowish-green glow. "Jesus Christ," Trevor whispered, taking a step back. The man took a step toward him, but he stepped backward, his feet moving in reverse while his twisted torso kept his backwards face pointing at Trevor. It was the most unnatural movement Trevor had ever seen, like watching a video played in reverse while the person still moved forward. Trevor ran to his truck. His hands fumbled with the door handle, slipped, fumbled again. Behind him, he could hear footsteps, that wrong, shuffling sound of someone walking backward while moving forward. He risked a glance over his shoulder. The man was closer now, maybe 20 feet away, that grotesque backwards body maintaining its pursuit. And now Trevor could see that it wasn't just his posture that was wrong. The man's clothes were on backwards. His shirt was buttoned up the back. His shoes were reversed on his feet. Trevor got the door open and hauled himself up into the cab. He slammed the door and hit the lock button. The man stopped at the edge of the parking space, his backwards face pressed close to the driver's side window, breath fogging the glass. Those inverted eyes stared at Trevor with an intelligence that was somehow worse than mindless horror. The man's backwards mouth opened, and he spoke. But the words came out reversed, like a recording played backward, a stream of incomprehensible syllables that hurt to hear. Trevor started the engine. The man stepped back, still moving in that horrible, backward-walking way. Trevor threw the truck into gear and pulled out of the parking space. As he swung toward the exit, his headlights swept across the pavilion area. There were more of them. A dozen figures stood throughout the rest stop, all facing away from his truck initially, then all beginning to turn in that same grotesque manner. Men and women, young and old, all with their bodies backwards, all with that same inverted wrongness to their features. Trevor accelerated toward the exit. One of the backwards people was standing directly in his path. He laid on the horn, but the figure didn't move. At the last second, Trevor swerved around it, his trailer fishtailing slightly on the pavement. He merged back onto the interstate, pushing his speed to 80 miles per hour, well over the limit for a loaded semi. His heart hammered in his chest. His hands shook on the steering wheel. After about 10 miles, his breathing started to slow. He checked his mirrors obsessively, but the road behind him was empty. Whatever those things were, they weren't following. Trevor drove for another hour before he started to relax. The sun was beginning to lighten the eastern sky. He passed a mile marker and realized he was making good time. Maybe he'd even make Atlanta ahead of schedule. Then he glanced in his rearview mirror and saw the backwards man sitting in his sleeper berth. The thing was pressed against the small window that separated the cab from the sleeping area, its inverted face staring at Trevor, its backwards mouth working silently. Trevor screamed and jerked the wheel. The truck swerved violently. He fought to regain control, nearly jackknifing before he managed to straighten out. He risked another look in the mirror. The sleeper berth appeared empty. Trevor's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the wheel. He took the next exit. He didn't care where it led. He just needed to get off the highway, needed to stop and check his truck, needed to confirm that nothing was in there with him. The exit led to a small town, one of those agricultural communities that consisted of a gas station, a diner, and maybe 50 houses. Trevor pulled into the gas station parking lot and sat there, engine running, trying to gather his courage. Finally, he opened the door between the cab and the sleeper berth. It was empty. Of course it was empty. The space was barely big enough for a mattress and his duffel bag. There was nowhere for someone to hide. But on the small mattress, pressed into the fabric, was an imprint, the outline of a human body, and the body was facing the wrong way. The head indentation was where the feet should be. The feet were where the head should be. Trevor grabbed his duffel bag and walked into the gas station on shaking legs. He bought coffee he didn't drink and a sandwich he couldn't eat. He told the clerk he felt sick, that he needed to rest. Could he park his truck there for a few hours? The clerk, a teenager with acne and a bored expression, shrugged and said sure. Trevor sat in his cab as the sun rose, unable to close his eyes, staring at that imprint on his mattress. Around noon, he finally worked up the courage to call his dispatcher and explain he was going to be late. He didn't explain why. That evening, he forced himself to get back on the road. He kept the partition to the sleeper berth closed. Every time he glanced in his mirrors, he expected to see that backwards face staring at him. But it never appeared. He made it to Atlanta 2 days later, delivered his cargo, and immediately put in for 2 weeks of vacation time. He needed to go home. He needed to be around normal people, in normal places, where reality followed expected rules. But Trevor Sullivan never really escaped the backwoods man. Every rest stop he passed after that night filled him with dread. Every time he used his mirrors, his eyes would dart to the sleeper berth, checking for movement, for that wrong silhouette. He started having nightmares, dreams where he would look down and discover his own body was twisted around, his feet pointing one way, while his face looked the other, his clothes on backward, his features inverted. 6 months after that night, Trevor quit trucking. He took a job at a warehouse, day shift only, where he never had to drive more than 10 miles or stop at a rest area in the middle of the night. He told people he'd gotten tired of the road, wanted to be home more. But the truth was simpler and more terrifying. He'd seen something that shouldn't exist, something that operated by rules opposite to reality. And he knew, with a certainty that made his blood run cold, that if he ever stopped at that rest area again, if he ever even saw the backwards man again, he wouldn't be running away. He'd be turning around. His body would twist at the waist, his bones would rearrange themselves, his face would invert, and he would join them in that parking lot, walking backward into forward motion, existing in a state of perpetual reversal. Forever wrong, forever backwards, forever waiting for the next driver who made the mistake of stopping in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sometimes, late at night, Trevor stands in front of his bathroom mirror and checks his reflection carefully. He looks for any sign that his features are starting to invert, that his body is beginning its terrible transformation. So far, he looks normal, but every time he blinks, just for a fraction of a second, he swears his reflection blinks the wrong way. Eyelids closing from bottom to top, instead of top to bottom. And when he turns around quickly, he sometimes feels a resistance, a pull, as if his upper body wants to keep turning while his feet stay planted. One day, he fears, the pull will be too strong. One day, he'll turn all the way around. Story 4. The Children's Playground. Sandra Kowalski specialized in overnight deliveries along the East Coast, running furniture from factories in North Carolina to distributors in New England. It was late October 2020, around 3 a.m., when she pulled into a rest stop on Interstate 95, somewhere in the Virginia-Maryland border region. She needed to stretch her legs and use the restroom before the final push toward Baltimore. The rest stop was larger than most she'd encountered. It had a proper visitors center that was closed for the night, extensive parking, and surprisingly, a children's playground visible in the distance under a series of lights. Sandra thought it was odd to have a playground at a highway rest stop, but then again, this was one of the major interstates. Families probably used it to let their kids burn off energy during long drives. After using the restroom, Sandra walked toward her truck. But something about the playground caught her attention. The lights illuminating it seemed brighter than necessary for 3 a.m., almost spotlight intensity. And she could hear sounds coming from it. Children's laughter, the squeak of swings, the thud of feet on wooden structures. Children playing. At 3 a.m, Sandra changed direction and walked toward the playground, telling herself she was just being responsible. If there were actually kids out here unsupervised at this hour, someone needed to check on them. The parking lot had been nearly empty, just her truck, one RV, and a couple of passenger vehicles. Where were the parents? As she got closer, the laughter became clearer. High-pitched giggles, the rhythmic creak of chains as swings moved back and forth, the metallic ding of someone climbing on monkey bars. The playground came into full view. It was elaborate, not one of those cheap plastic structures, but a genuine wooden fortress with multiple levels, tube slides, climbing walls, and a separate area with swings and a merry-go-round. And there were children on it. Sandra counted at least 8 of them, ranging in age from maybe 5 to 12 years old. They were all wearing pajamas. "Hey," Sandra called out. "Kids, are your parents around?" The children stopped playing. All at once, all movement ceased. They turned to look at her in perfect synchronization. Their faces were blank, not featureless but expressionless. Empty eyes, slack mouths, skin that seemed waxy and artificial in the harsh light. "Where are your parents?" Sandra asked again, her voice faltering slightly. One of the children, a girl of about 10 with blonde hair in pigtails, wearing pink pajamas with cartoon cats on them, stepped forward. When she spoke, her mouth didn't quite match the words, like a badly dubbed foreign film. "We're waiting for our parents," the girl said in a monotone voice. "They said they'd be right back. That was a long time ago. Will you help us find them?" Sandra's instincts were screaming at her to leave, but her rational mind insisted this was just a weird situation, not a dangerous one. Maybe these kids were sleepwalking. Mass sleepwalking. That was a thing, wasn't it? "Okay," Sandra said carefully. "Let's go to the visitors center and find someone who can help." "We tried that," another child said, a boy with dark hair, wearing Superman pajamas. "The doors are locked. Nobody comes. We just play. We play and we wait." "How long have you been waiting?" Sandra asked. The children looked at each other. The blonde girl tilted her head at an angle that was slightly wrong, slightly too far. "A long time," she said, "since the accident, since the van went off the road." Sandra felt ice settle in her stomach. "What accident?" "The church van," the girl continued. We were coming home from camp. It was late. The driver was tired. There was a deer in the road. We swerved. We went through the guardrail. We rolled and rolled and rolled down the hill. We all died, the boy in Superman pajamas added matter-of-factly. But we woke up here, and we've been playing, waiting for our parents to come get us. Sandra took a step backward. The children took a step forward, moving in perfect unison again. "You seem nice," the blonde girl said. "Will you play with us?" "Nobody ever plays with us. People usually drive away. But you stopped. You walked over. You can see us. Will you play?" I need to go," Sandra said. "Please don't leave," all the children said at once, their voices overlapping in a horrible chorus. "Nobody stays. Nobody ever stays. We're so lonely. We've been waiting so long. The parents never come back. But if you stay, if you play with us, maybe then someone will come. Maybe then we can go home." Sandra turned and ran. Behind her, the children began to sing. A nursery rhyme she half recognized. But the words were wrong, twisted. Something about broken guardrails and rolling hills and sleeping children who never wake up. She reached her truck, fumbling with her keys. The children hadn't followed her. She could still see them in the distance, standing in a line at the edge of the playground, their pale faces turned toward her. But their singing followed her, growing louder, more insistent. Sandra got her truck started and pulled out of the parking lot fast enough to leave rubber on the pavement. She drove 15 miles before she pulled over at a well-lit gas station and looked up. "Rest Stop Accident, Virginia, Maryland, I-95, on her phone. The article came up immediately. September 2008. A church van carrying 12 children home from summer camp had gone off the road near mile marker 62. The driver had fallen asleep at the wheel. The van had crashed through a guardrail and rolled down an embankment. 8 children had died at the scene. 4 survived with injuries. The accident had occurred at 11:47 p.m. Sandra looked at the photos in the article. There was the blonde girl with pigtails. There was the boy who loved Superman. There were the others, smiling in summer camp photos, alive before the accident that killed them. She checked the location of the accident. It was exactly where the rest stop was located now. The rest stop had been built 3 years after the crash, the article mentioned, as part of an initiative to improve safety and provide more rest areas for tired drivers. They'd built a playground, a children's playground at the location where 8 children had died because a tired driver had dozed off. Sandra sat in her truck at the gas station until sunrise. She couldn't drive, couldn't stop shaking. When she finally continued her journey, she took a different route to Baltimore, one that avoided I-95 entirely. She researched the rest stop later from the safety of her home. Found the visitor reviews online. Mixed reviews, mostly mundane complaints about cleanliness or vending machine prices. But scattered throughout were other comments, marked as not helpful by other users. Heard kids playing at the playground at 2 a.m. Nobody was there when I looked. Weird place. My daughter said she saw children in pajamas asking her to play. Nobody else was around. Don't stop here at night. Just don't. Trust me. Sandra learned that the rest stop had a reputation among some drivers as a place to avoid after dark. The playground was particularly notorious. It was included in several haunted highway blogs and paranormal websites. Some sources claimed that on the anniversary of the accident, exactly at 11:47 p.m., you could hear the sound of a van crashing through the guardrail if you stood in the right spot. But most disturbingly, Sandra found reports of people who had stopped at the playground at night and engaged with the children. These reports always ended the same way. The person would start playing with the children, pushing them on swings, going down slides with them, playing tag. They would play for what felt like minutes, but turned out to be hours. And when they finally left, when they finally got back in their vehicles and drove away, they would discover that time had passed strangely. 5 hours. 10 hours. One person claimed they'd lost an entire day, and every person who played with the children reported the same strange aftermath. For months afterward, they would hear children singing in the distance. They would wake up at 11:47 p.m. every night, wide awake, as if something had called to them. Some reported seeing children in pajamas, standing at the edges of parking lots, at the corners of their yards, at the foot of their beds, always watching, always waiting, always hoping someone would stay and play forever. Sandra Kowalski never stopped at that rest area again. She circulated warnings on trucker forums and CB radio channels, telling people to avoid it, especially at night. Some believed her, many didn't. But every October, on the anniversary of her encounter, Sandra wakes at 3 a.m. to the sound of children singing. She looks out her window and sees nothing. But the singing continues, faint and distant, carrying words about waiting and loneliness, and the desperate hope that someone, someday, will stay and play and never leave. The children are still waiting. They've been waiting since 2008, since the moment their lives ended and their spirits woke up in a playground that didn't exist yet, built on top of their tragedy. They'll wait forever if they have to, and if you stop, if you see them, if you're kind enough to approach and caring enough to ask if they need help, they'll ask you to play. Just for a little while, just to ease the loneliness. But a little while doesn't mean the same thing to the dead as it does to the living. A little while, for them, is forever. And if you agree to play, you may find that you can never truly leave. Part of you will always be there, pushing those swings, climbing those structures, singing those songs with children who died 12 years before the playground was ever built. Sandra still drives her route along the East Coast, but she takes I-81 now, adding hours to her journey. It's worth it, she tells people, to avoid the traffic on I-95. But the truth is simpler. She's avoiding the children. Because sometimes on lonely stretches of highway late at night, she catches glimpses of them in her peripheral vision. Small figures in pajamas standing on the shoulder, faces turned toward the road, waiting for someone to stop, waiting for someone to stay. And Sandra knows that if she ever stops at that rest area again, if she ever walks to that playground once more, the children won't let her leave a second time. Story 5. The Infinite Hallway. Marcus Webb had been delivering medical supplies across the Midwest for 9 years when he encountered something on Interstate 70 that fundamentally changed his understanding of reality. It was January 2022, deep in the winter grip, when he pulled into a rest stop outside of Salina, Kansas, at approximately 1:30 a.m. The temperature had dropped to 5 degrees, and a light snow was beginning to fall. The rest stop was modern, built within the last few years, all glass and steel, with automatic doors and energy-efficient lighting. Marcus appreciated these newer facilities. They were clean, well-maintained, and usually safe. He grabbed his heavy coat and headed inside, planning to use the facilities, grab a snack from the vending machines, and maybe walk around a bit to stretch his legs. The automatic doors slid open with a soft pneumatic hiss. Marcus stepped into the main lobby. A large, well-lit space with tile floors, wooden benches, and a series of informational displays about Kansas history and attractions. To his left was the entrance to the men's restroom. To his right, a hallway that presumably led to additional facilities. The building was empty. Not surprising at this hour on a Wednesday night in the dead of winter. Marcus headed toward the men's restroom, his boots squeaking slightly on the polished floor. He was about 10 feet from the restroom entrance when he stopped. Something felt wrong. He couldn't articulate what exactly, but his instincts, honed by thousands of miles on the road, by countless rest stops in countless states, were screaming at him that something about this place was off. The hallway to his right caught his attention. He looked down it and felt his stomach drop. The hallway was longer than it should be, much longer. From outside, the building had appeared to be maybe 60 feet deep, but this hallway stretched into the distance for what looked like hundreds of feet, the overhead lights creating a repetitive pattern that seemed to diminish to a point on the horizon. He could see doors along both walls, restroom doors, closet doors, doors marked maintenance and staff only. Marcus blinked, rubbed his eyes, looked again. The hallway remained impossibly long. He walked toward it slowly. As he got closer, he realized something else was wrong. The air near the hallway was colder than the rest of the building. Not drastically, but noticeably. And there was a smell, something like old paper and dust, despite the building's newness. Marcus stood at the entrance to the hallway and looked down its length. The lights flickered slightly, creating a strange strobe effect. The pattern of doors repeated at regular intervals, but as his eyes traveled further down the corridor, the doors seemed to become less distinct, more like suggestions of doors than actual entrances. "Hello?" Marcus called out. His voice echoed strangely, taking too long to fade. No response. He pulled out his phone and checked the signal. Full bars. He opened his GPS app. It showed him standing exactly where he should be, at a rest stop off Interstate 70 near Salina. Nothing unusual, except he was looking at something that couldn't possibly exist. Marcus made a decision. He would walk down the hallway, prove to himself that it was some kind of optical illusion, some trick of the architecture and lighting. He would reach the end, which would probably be only 50 or 60 feet away, despite appearances, and then he would laugh at himself for being spooked. He started walking. His boots echoed on the tile. He passed the first door on his left, men's restroom. The second door on his right, women's restroom. Third door on his left, family restroom. Fourth door on his right, maintenance. Then the pattern repeated. Men's restroom, women's restroom, family restroom, maintenance. Marcus kept walking. The pattern repeated again and again. After passing what must have been the 12th set of identical doors, he stopped and turned around. The entrance to the main lobby was no longer visible. The hallway stretched behind him just as endlessly as it stretched ahead. And when he looked carefully at the doors he'd just passed, he realized something horrifying. They were exactly the same doors. Not just identical in appearance, but the same individual doors. He could see a small scuff mark on the men's restroom door at ankle height, a particular knot in the wooden trim around the women's restroom door. These were the exact same doors, repeating over and over. He was stuck in a loop, walking forward, but somehow returning to the same 4 doors, over and over, while the hallway extended impossibly in both directions. Marcus pulled out his phone, still full signal. He called 911. 911, what's your emergency? I'm trapped, Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled panic. I'm at a rest stop on I-70 near Salina. Something's wrong with the building. I'm stuck in a hallway that shouldn't exist. Sir, can you exit the building? I'm trying. I've been walking for 10 minutes. I can't find the exit." There was a pause on the line. "Sir, have you been drinking?" "No. I'm a commercial driver. I'm stone sober. There's something wrong with this place. I'm going to send a unit to check on you. Can you see any exit signs?" Marcus looked up. There, in the distance ahead of him, was a green exit sign. It seemed impossibly far away, but it was there. "Yes," he said. "I can see one. I'm going to head toward it." He started walking again, faster now, nearly jogging. The same 4 doors passed by on either side. Men's restroom, women's restroom, family restroom, maintenance. Over and over, the pattern repeating, but the exit sign never getting closer. His phone rang, the 911 operator calling back. "Sir, the officer is at the rest stop. He says the building is locked and dark. There's no one inside." "That's impossible," Marcus said, breathing hard from his jogging pace. "I'm inside right now. The lights are on. I can see them from here." "Sir, he's looking in the windows. The building is empty and dark." "Are you sure you're at the rest stop on I-70? Marcus stopped running. He looked at his phone's GPS again. It still showed him at the rest stop. But according to the 911 dispatcher, he wasn't there. He was somewhere else, in some version of the rest stop that existed separately from the real world. "I need to get out," Marcus said, his voice breaking slightly. "How do I get out?" "Try the doors," the dispatcher suggested. "Try opening one of the doors." Marcus approached the nearest door, the men's restroom. He grabbed the handle and pulled. It opened easily. Inside was not a restroom. Inside was another hallway, identical to the one he was standing in. 4 doors: men's restroom, women's restroom, family restroom, maintenance, repeating into the distance. He closed the door quickly and tried the next one. Another hallway. The family restroom door. Another hallway. The maintenance door. Another hallway. Every door opened onto an identical corridor. The rest stop had become a maze of repeating hallways, each one endless, each one containing doors that led only to more of the same. Marcus ran. He didn't care about direction anymore. He just ran, taking random turns through random doors, sprinting down endless corridors, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The phone fell from his hand, skittering across the tile. He left it behind. Time became meaningless. He might have run for hours or for days. The fluorescent lights never changed. The pattern of doors never changed. His legs burned with exhaustion, but fear kept him moving. Finally, he couldn't run anymore. He collapsed against a wall, sliding down to sit on the cold tile floor. His throat was raw. His legs were cramping. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst. And in the silence, he heard something. Footsteps, coming from somewhere in the maze of hallways. Heavy boots on tile, echoing and multiplying until it sounded like an army marching through the corridors. Marcus forced himself to his feet. The footsteps were getting louder, closer, coming from multiple directions at once. He picked a door at random and went through it. This hallway was different. It was darker. Most of the fluorescent lights were off, with only every 4th or 5th one functioning. And at the far end, almost lost in the darkness, he could see something that wasn't a door or a hallway. It was a window showing darkness, and beyond it, the faint glow of parking lot lights. Marcus ran toward it with the last of his strength. The footsteps behind him were thunderous now, close enough that he could hear the scrape of boot heels, the rustle of movement. But he didn't look back. He focused on that window, on the promise of the outside world. He reached it and grabbed the frame. It was stuck, painted shut or locked somehow. The footsteps were right behind him now. Marcus picked up one of the wooden benches that lined the hallway and swung it with desperate strength at the window. The glass shattered. Cold air rushed in, so cold it burned his lungs. He knocked out the remaining shards with the bench and climbed through, falling out onto frozen ground. Marcus lay there for a moment, gasping, feeling the bite of winter wind on his face. Then he forced himself up and looked behind him. The window he'd broken was one of the small decorative windows near the roofline of the rest stop building. Impossible to have climbed through. It was maybe 12 inches square. But the glass was broken, shattered from the inside out. The building itself was dark. Through the main windows, Marcus could see nothing but empty space and darkness. No lights, no hallways. Just an ordinary rest stop, closed for the winter, due to budget constraints according to a sign he hadn't noticed when he'd arrived. His truck was still in the parking lot, exactly where he'd left it. His phone was on the driver's seat. He had no memory of leaving it there, but there it was, showing 17 missed calls from the 911 dispatcher. Marcus got in his truck and drove. He didn't stop for gas, didn't stop for food, didn't stop until he was 300 miles away, and the sun had risen, and he could see normal people doing normal things in normal places. He filed a report with the Kansas Highway Patrol. They investigated. The rest stop had been closed for 3 months due to state budget cuts. The doors were locked and chained. There was no way anyone could have entered. The small decorative window near the roof was indeed broken, shattered from the inside. They found no explanation for that. Marcus never drove through Kansas again. He took routes that added days to his journeys, but that was fine. He would drive through mountains, through deserts, through any natural obstacle rather than risk encountering that rest stop again. Because he knows the truth. Somewhere between the physical rest stop and whatever place he'd ended up, there's a crack in reality. A space where hallways extend forever, where doors lead only to more doors, where the rules of geometry and space don't apply. And that space is hungry. It caught him once and let him go. Or maybe he escaped. Or maybe it was never meant to keep him. But Marcus knows that if he ever enters that building again, if he ever sets foot in that seemingly innocent rest stop, he won't find a way out a second time. Sometimes, late at night, Marcus wakes up from dreams of endless hallways. In those dreams, he's still running, still looking for an exit, still hearing those heavy footsteps behind him. And when he wakes, just for a moment, before his eyes adjust to his familiar bedroom, he thinks he's still there, still trapped in the infinite hallway, still running. And maybe, in some way, part of him is. Maybe part of him is still there, still walking past those 4 endlessly repeating doors, still searching for a way back to the real world. Maybe that's what the footsteps were. Other people who'd entered the hallway before him, lost forever in the maze, reduced to nothing but the sound of their endless search for an exit that they'll never find. Story 6. The Radio Broadcast. Thomas Briggs had been a long-distance trucker for 16 years, running freight between California and Texas on a bi-weekly schedule. He was a creature of habit, same routes, same rest stops, same routine. On August 19th, 2019, that routine was shattered during what should have been an ordinary overnight drive through New Mexico on Interstate 40. The time was 2:15 a.m. Thomas was somewhere between Albuquerque and Tucumcari, driving through high desert terrain under a star-filled sky. His CB radio had been quiet for hours. not unusual in these remote stretches. He'd been listening to a classic rock station out of Albuquerque, but it had faded to static about 20 minutes earlier. He reached for the radio dial to find something else, anything to break the monotony. He scanned through the FM band. Static, static, static. Then suddenly, a clear signal. A man's voice, calm and professional, like a news anchor or DJ. And if you're just joining us, this is emergency broadcast station Omega 7. This message is for all travelers on Interstate 40, between mile markers 270 and 280. Please be advised that the rest stop at mile marker 277 is to be avoided. Repeat, do not stop at mile marker 277. This is not a test. This is not a joke. If you are currently at the mile marker 277, rest stop, evacuate immediately, and proceed to the next available exit. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. He checked his odometer and did a quick calculation. He was at mile marker 272. The rest stop being warned about was just 5 miles ahead. The voice on the radio continued. If you have already made contact with the entities at the mile marker 277 rest stop, maintain radio silence and proceed directly to the quarantine checkpoint at mile marker 295. Do not attempt to communicate with anyone outside your vehicle. Do not stop for any reason. Emergency response teams are standing by. What the hell? Thomas muttered, reaching for his CB radio mic. But before he could key it, the voice on the radio spoke again, and this time it addressed him directly. Thomas Briggs, driver of a 2014 Peterbilt, California plates, registration number. The voice read off his exact license plate number. You are currently at mile marker 283. You will reach the danger zone in 4 minutes. Maintain current speed. Do not stop. Do not investigate. This message will self-terminate in 30 seconds. Thomas's hands tightened on the wheel. How did they know his name? His license plate? How was any of this possible? The voice counted down. 20 seconds, 15, 10. At 0, the station cut to static. Thomas immediately tried to find it again, spinning the dial frantically. Nothing. Just regular stations, late-night talk radio, Mexican music, more static. The emergency broadcast was gone. His CB radio crackled to life. A woman's voice, distorted and breaking up. Need help, please. Rest stop 277. Attacked by... Then nothing. Thomas picked up his CB mic. This is Bulldog. I'm receiving your transmission. What's your location and status? Static answered him. Then the woman's voice again. Oh God, they're coming back. Please help us. Children in the bathroom. Need help. Every instinct Thomas had told him to drive past. But there were children involved. Children in danger. He couldn't just ignore that. The rest stop sign appeared in his headlights. Rest area 1 mile. Thomas took the exit, telling himself he would just do a quick check. If he saw anything dangerous, he'd call 911 and let the professionals handle it. But he had to at least look. He couldn't live with himself if something happened to kids, and he'd done nothing. The rest stop was well lit and appeared completely normal. 2 cars in the parking lot, both with their lights off. No obvious signs of distress. No people visible. The building looked ordinary. Standard concrete construction, restrooms, vending machines. Thomas parked his rig and stepped out. The desert night was cool and absolutely silent. No wind, no insects, no sounds at all except his own breathing and footsteps. Hello? He called out. Anyone need help? No answer. He walked toward the restroom building. One of the cars, a blue Honda, had its driver's door slightly ajar. Thomas approached it carefully and looked inside. Empty. Keys still in the ignition. A woman's purse on the passenger seat. In the back seat, 2 child car seats. His heart rate increased. He pulled out his phone to call 911. No signal. That wasn't right. He'd had 3 bars just a few minutes ago on the highway. The CB radio in his truck crackled to life again, loud enough that he could hear it from where he stood. The same woman's voice. Trapped in the building, can't get out, doors won't open, please. Thomas ran to the restroom building and grabbed the door handle. It opened easily. Inside was completely normal. Standard restroom, clean and empty. No woman, no children, no signs of anyone. "Hello? Where are you?" he shouted. The CB radio again. "In the walls. They're in the walls. Can you hear us?" Thomas backed out of the building. Something was very wrong. He needed to leave, needed to get back to his truck and get away from this place. That's when he noticed the second car. A silver Toyota. And sitting in the driver's seat was a man in a truck driver's cap, staring straight ahead, not moving. "Hey," Thomas approached the car. "Are you okay?" The man didn't respond, didn't even blink. Thomas tapped on the window. Nothing. He tried the door, locked. He tapped harder on the window. The man's head slowly turned toward him, and Thomas saw that the man's eyes were completely black. Not just the pupils, the entire eye, from lid to lid, solid black. And when the man opened his mouth, static came out. The same static he'd heard on the radio, formed into words. "You should have kept driving, Thomas Briggs." Thomas stumbled backward. The man in the car continued staring at him with those impossible black eyes. The CB radio in his truck was going crazy now. Multiple voices overlapping, all in that static, distorted tone. Should have kept driving. Warning was clear. Too late now. You stopped. You're one of us now. Thomas ran to his truck. His hands shook so badly he could barely grab the door handle. He got inside and started the engine. In his rearview mirror, he saw the man from the silver Toyota getting out of his car, moving with jerky, unnatural movements, like a puppet on strings. Thomas threw his truck into gear and accelerated toward the exit. In his side mirrors, he saw more figures emerging from the restroom building. Dozens of them, all moving in that same puppet-like way, all with mouths open, static pouring out. He merged back onto Interstate 40, pushing his speed to 90 miles per hour. Behind him, the rest stop receded into the distance. His CB radio continued its chorus of static voices for another 10 minutes before finally going silent. At mile marker 295, just as the radio broadcast had mentioned, Thomas saw flashing lights, a checkpoint, highway patrol vehicles, an ambulance, and several black SUVs with no markings. Armed men in tactical gear flagged him down. They questioned him for 3 hours, asked what he'd seen, what he'd heard, if he'd touched anything or anyone. They examined him with strange handheld devices. They took samples of his skin, his hair. They made him describe every detail multiple times. Finally, a woman in a dark suit sat down across from him in the back of one of the SUVs. "Mr. Briggs, what you encountered tonight is classified information. You will sign a non-disclosure agreement. You will never speak of this to anyone. You will tell people you stopped for routine rest and saw nothing unusual." "What the hell was that place?" Thomas demanded. "What were those things?" The woman's expression didn't change. "There are phenomena we don't fully understand. Locations where reality becomes unstable. The rest stop at mile marker 277 is one such place. We monitor it. We warn people away. But sometimes people stop anyway." "The radio broadcast. How did you know my name? My license plate?" "We track all vehicles approaching high-risk zones. We broadcast targeted warnings. You received yours. You chose to stop anyway." "There was a woman calling for help. Children." "There was no woman. There were no children. There was only the rest stop, doing what it does. mimicking distress calls to lure in good Samaritans, people who stop to help, people like you. Thomas felt sick. What happens to people who don't get away? The woman stood up. They become part of the rest stop, part of the phenomenon. They sit in their vehicles with black eyes and mouths full of static, waiting to lure in the next person, waiting to grow the collection. But I got away. You got lucky. You were fast enough, strong-willed enough. Most people aren't. She opened the SUV door. Sign the papers, Mr. Briggs, then go home. And in the future, when you hear an emergency broadcast telling you to avoid a location, please listen. Thomas signed. He drove home. He never spoke about it to anyone, as promised. But every time he drives Interstate 40 through New Mexico, he keeps his radio off. All radios, FM, AM, CB, satellite, everything off. Because sometimes, even now, even hundreds of miles from that rest stop, he hears static creeping into his broadcasts. And within that static, he can almost make out words. Come back, Thomas Briggs. You're still part of us. You touched the doorknob. You breathed our air. You'll always be connected. One day, you'll stop there again. And next time, you won't be fast enough. Thomas Briggs still drives, still makes his California to Texas runs. But he takes a different route now, one that loops far to the south through Arizona and El Paso. It adds a full day to his journey time, costs him more in fuel, cuts into his profits. But it keeps him away from mile marker 277, away from that rest stop where reality bends and where something hungry waits, wearing the faces of people who stopped to help, who thought they were doing the right thing, who didn't drive away when they had the chance. The rest stop is still there. The black-eyed figures still sit in their vehicles, mouths open, broadcasting their static pleas for help into the void. And every so often, someone else stops. Someone else hears the distress call and can't ignore it. And the collection grows. Story 7. The Mirror World. Patricia Martinez was 3 years into her trucking career when she encountered something that no amount of road experience could have prepared her for. It was November 2021, around 11:30 p.m., when she pulled into a rest stop on Interstate 10, somewhere in the wasteland between Phoenix and Tucson, Arizona. The desert night was cold and clear, with a sliver of moon hanging low on the horizon. Patricia needed to use the restroom and check her load straps before continuing the final leg to Tucson. The rest stop was small, just the basics, but clean and well-maintained. 2 other vehicles were present, a recreational vehicle with California plates and a pickup truck that looked like it belonged to a construction worker. The restroom was standard issue, brightly lit with fluorescent tubes that hummed slightly. Patricia was washing her hands when she noticed something odd about the mirror above the sink. It was slightly misaligned, tilted at a subtle angle that created a disorienting effect. She reached up to adjust it without thinking. The moment her fingers touched the mirror's frame, everything changed. The lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. But they seemed different now. The fluorescent hum was gone, replaced by perfect silence. Patricia looked around. The restroom appeared identical to moments before, but something felt fundamentally wrong. The air tasted different, metallic somehow. She looked back at the mirror and felt her heart stop. Her reflection was wrong. Not dramatically, nothing so obvious as a monster or a different person, but subtle differences that sent chills down her spine. Her reflection's hair was parted on the wrong side. The small mole on her right cheek was on her left in the reflection. Her shirt was buttoned opposite to how she'd put it on. What the hell? Patricia whispered. Her reflection's lips moved, but the words came out backward, like a recording played in reverse. She backed away from the mirror and turned to leave. The door to the restroom was still there, but the sign on it was backward. Nemo W instead of women. Patricia pushed through it anyway. The rest stop on the other side was identical but inverted. The vending machines were on the opposite wall. The informational displays about Arizona attractions were reversed, their text mirror images of normal writing. And the vehicles in the parking lot were wrong. Her truck was there, but it was reversed. The driver's side on the right, the company logo backward on the trailer. The RV and pickup truck were also reversed, their text and logos appearing in mirror image. Patricia ran to her truck. She grabbed the door handle, the wrong side door handle, and pulled. It opened, revealing an interior that was exactly like her truck, but backwards. Everything on the wrong side. The steering wheel on the right, the passenger seat on the left. Her air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror, but the scent was wrong. Not pine like it should be, but something else. Something that smelled like pines opposite, whatever that might be. She climbed in anyway and tried to start the engine. The key wouldn't turn. She tried again, forcing it. Nothing. The engine was dead, or worse. The engine didn't exist in a way that could be started. This was a mirror truck, an inverted reflection of her vehicle, and it couldn't function because it wasn't real. Patricia got out of the truck and looked around desperately. The rest stop was silent. No sound of distant highway traffic, no wind, no insects. Just oppressive, absolute silence. Then she saw movement. Someone was coming out of the restroom building. A woman who looked exactly like Patricia. Same height, same build, same clothes. But this woman moved wrong. Her gait was reversed, like watching a recording played backwards. She walked backward while somehow moving forward. Each step a contradiction of motion and direction. The mirror. Patricia looked at the real Patricia and smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of something that had been waiting for a very long time, for someone to touch that mirror, to make contact, to open the door between worlds. You touched the frame, the mirror, Patricia said, her voice echoing strangely. You opened the crossing. Now you're here. Now you're stuck. Like I was stuck. Like all of us are stuck. More figures emerged from the restroom, from the shadows, from behind the vehicles. Mirror people, reversed humans. All moving in that wrong, backwards-forward way. All with that same predatory smile. What is this place? Patricia demanded, her voice breaking. The mirror world, her double replied. The reflection realm. Every mirror is a door, but doors are locked from this side. We can't cross over. We can only watch. Watch the real world living while we're stuck here in the reverse. But when someone touches the frame, when they make that connection, they cross over. And we can cross back. Patricia backed away. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to straighten the mirror. Intentions don't matter. Actions do. You touched. You crossed. And now I can take your place. The mirror, Patricia stepped forward. With each step she became more solid, more real. The subtle wrongness of her appearance was fading. Her hair shifted, her mole moved, her shirt buttoned correctly. Meanwhile, Patricia looked down at her own hands and saw with horror that they were becoming less solid, more reflective. Her skin was taking on a silvery quality, like she was turning into a living mirror. No, Patricia screamed. She ran, not knowing where she was going, just knowing she had to get away. Behind her, the mirror. Patricia laughed, a sound like glass breaking in reverse. Patricia ran past the parking lot, into the desert beyond. The landscape was wrong here. Rocks and cacti were inverted versions of themselves, casting shadows in the wrong direction, despite the moon's position. She ran until her lungs burned, and her legs felt like rubber. Finally, she collapsed behind a large boulder, gasping for air. She looked at her hands in the moonlight. They were more reflective than before, silver spreading up her arms like infection. She was becoming part of the mirror world, becoming a permanent resident of this backwards realm. Think, Patricia told herself, there has to be a way back. If I crossed over, I can cross back. She remembered the mirror, the frame. She'd touched it and crossed from the real world to this inverted one. If she could find that same mirror and touch it again from this side, maybe she could reverse the process. Patricia forced herself to stand and made her way back to the rest stop. The mirror, Patricia, was gone, probably already crossed into the real world, probably already living Patricia's life. The other mirror people had vanished as well. Patricia entered the restroom. It was empty and silent. She approached the mirror, the inverted mirror, and looked at her reflection. On the other side of the mirror, in the real world, she could see herself as she should be. Not reversed, not inverted. Just normal Patricia, standing in a normal restroom. But that normal Patricia was moving independently, adjusting her hair, checking her appearance. That was the mirror Patricia, already settled into her stolen life. Patricia raised her increasingly reflective hand and touched the mirror frame. Nothing happened. She touched it again, pressed harder, tried to will herself across. The surface of the mirror was solid, impenetrable, locked from this side, just as her double had said. Patricia screamed and pounded on the mirror with both fists. The surface rippled like water, but didn't break, didn't open. On the other side, the false Patricia looked directly at her, made eye contact, and smiled. Then she turned and walked out of the restroom, leaving Patricia trapped. For hours, Patricia tried everything. She tried breaking the mirror. It wouldn't shatter. She tried finding other mirrors in the rest stop. There was only the one. She tried the vehicles again, all dead, all non-functional. She tried walking into the desert to find another location, another crossing point. But the desert in the mirror world was infinite and unchanging. No matter how far she walked, she always ended up back at the rest stop. It was a loop, a trap, a prison made of reversed reality. As the hours passed, Patricia became more reflective. Her skin was entirely silver now, her features taking on that subtle wrongness that marked the mirror people. Her voice began to echo strangely. Her movements started to reverse, walking backward while moving forward, the same contradictory motion she'd seen in the others. She was becoming one of them. A permanent resident of the mirror world, a reversed reflection of a human being, trapped forever in an inverted reality, able to see the real world but never touch it, never return to it. Patricia Martinez's truck was found abandoned at a rest stop on Interstate 10, engine running, keys in the ignition. Security cameras showed her entering the restroom building at 11:43 p.m. and never coming out. An extensive search of the area found no trace of her. The case remains unsolved. But if you stop at that rest stop, if you enter that restroom and look in the mirror above the sink, sometimes you'll see something strange. A silvery figure standing behind your reflection. A woman with your face, but reversed, with features slightly wrong, with movements that don't quite match your own. And if you're foolish enough to touch the mirror frame, if you try to adjust that slightly tilted mirror, You'll cross over. You'll swap places. You'll become the one trapped in the mirror world while your reversed double takes your life, lives in your skin, becomes you in the real world. Patricia is still there, in the mirror realm, still standing in that restroom, still pressing her reflective hands against the barrier between worlds. And she's not alone. There are others, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all trapped in that same inverted rest stop, all visible only as strange distortions in mirrors, all waiting for someone to touch the frame, all hoping for a chance to swap places, to escape, to return to a reality that moves in the right direction. The mirror people wait patiently. They have forever, after all. Time moves differently in the mirror world, backward, forward, sideways, all directions at once. And eventually, someone always touches the frame. Someone always opens the door. And when they do, the mirror people smile, their backward smiles, and prepare for the crossing, prepare to steal another life, to trap another soul in the endless inverted nightmare of the reflection realm. Don't touch the mirrors at rest stops. Don't try to adjust them. Don't press your hands against them. Don't make that connection between worlds. Because once you cross over, once you open that door, you won't be coming back. Your reflection will, and it will live your life better than you ever did, while you stand on the other side of the glass, reversed and forgotten, watching the real world fade further away with each passing moment, becoming more reflective, more inverted, more permanently trapped in a world where everything is backwards and nothing ever escapes. Story 8. The Future Warning. Daniel Okonkwo had been driving trucks for 12 years, running freight up and down the eastern seaboard. He was known among his colleagues as a no-nonsense driver, punctual, careful, and completely uninterested in the supernatural stories that truckers sometimes shared over CB radio. If something couldn't be explained by logic and physics, Daniel didn't waste time thinking about it. That changed on February 9th, 2023, at exactly 4:44 a.m., when Daniel pulled into a rest stop on Interstate 95 in South Carolina, about 40 miles north of Charleston. He needed coffee, he needed to stretch, and he needed to check a tire that had been reading slightly low pressure on his monitoring system. The rest stop was modern and quiet, with a handful of vehicles scattered across the parking lot. Daniel parked, grabbed his thermos, and headed inside for a refill. The building was bright and clean, with modern amenities, touchscreen vending machines, charging stations for electric vehicles, digital information displays. One of those displays caught his attention. It was showing local weather and news updates. But something about the date made him stop and stare. The display read, February 9th, 2025. 2 years in the future. Daniel blinked and looked again. No, he must have misread. But the date remained, February 9th, 2025. And the time, 4:44 a.m. Screens broken, Daniel muttered to himself. Obviously a software glitch. He continued to the coffee machine. While his thermos was filling, he noticed a bulletin board near the entrance. It was covered with the usual rest stop postings, trucking company ads, missing person flyers, safety warnings. But one flyer in the center caught his eye. It was printed on bright yellow paper, impossible to miss. Warning to Daniel Okonkwo. On February 9th, 2023 at 4:44 a.m., you will stop at this rest stop. You are reading this now. This warning is for you. Do not continue south on I-95. Exit at Highway 17 and take the inland route. There is a multi-vehicle accident at mile marker 88. Time, 5:23 a.m. You will be involved. You will be killed. This is not a joke. This is not a prank. This is your only warning. Exit at Highway 17. Daniel felt his blood run cold. He tore the flyer off the board with shaking hands. The paper was real, solid. The text was printed, not handwritten. It looked official, like something a highway safety department might produce. But that was impossible. This had to be a prank. Someone had found out his name somehow, maybe from his truck's company logo, and they were messing with him. Except, how did they know he would stop at this exact rest stop at this exact time? He hadn't planned it. He'd chosen to stop here on impulse because of the low tire pressure warning. Daniel pulled out his phone and searched for accidents on I-95 South Carolina. Nothing. No active incidents. He checked the time. 4:48 a.m. According to the warning, the accident wouldn't happen for another 35 minutes. He looked at the bulletin board again. Other flyers were posted around the yellow warning, but they all seemed normal. Missing person reports, lost pet notices, nothing else strange. Daniel walked outside to his truck, the warning flyer clutched in his hand. This was insane. He should just ignore it, continue on his route, prove to himself that it was nonsense. But something stopped him. A feeling he couldn't name, a certainty that felt like it came from somewhere outside himself. The warning was real. He knew it with absolute conviction, even though it made no sense. He climbed into his truck and pulled up his GPS. Highway 17 was indeed a viable alternate route. It would add about an hour to his journey, but it would keep him off I-95. Daniel sat there for 5 full minutes, trying to decide. Finally, logic and reason took over. He was letting a prank flyer dictate his decisions. That was ridiculous. He'd been driving professionally for 12 years, without an accident. He was careful, attentive, safe. Whatever might or might not happen at mile marker 88, he could handle it. Daniel merged back onto I-95 South and continued his journey. The highway was nearly empty at this hour, just a few scattered vehicles. The sun hadn't risen yet, and the pre-dawn darkness was absolute, except for his headlights and the occasional streetlight. Mile marker 85 passed, then 86, then 87. At mile marker 87.5, Daniel saw the first signs of something wrong. A car was pulled over on the shoulder, hazard lights flashing. As he passed it, he saw the driver, a woman, frantically waving her arms, trying to flag someone down. Daniel's instinct was to stop, to help. But he remembered the warning. Mile marker 88. Time. 5:23 a.m. He checked. His clock. 5:21 a.m. He drove past the woman. In his rearview mirror, he saw her still waving. Guilt gnawed at him, but fear was stronger. Mile marker 88. The clock ticked to 5:22 a.m. Daniel slowed down, scanning the road ahead. Nothing looked unusual. Just empty highway stretching into the distance, the first hints of dawn starting to lighten the eastern sky. 5:23 a.m. And then it happened. A deer, a massive buck with a full rack of antlers, bounded out of the darkness from the left side of the highway. A car 200 yards ahead of Daniel swerved to avoid it, overcorrected, and spun out. The car crossed into the opposite lanes, then back again, rotating violently. A southbound semi-truck crested a small rise ahead. The driver saw the spinning car and tried to brake, but on the slightly wet pavement from overnight humidity, the truck began to jackknife. Daniel's training kicked in. He was already slowing, already preparing. But then a pickup truck coming from behind, traveling too fast, not paying attention, tried to swerve around the chaos. It clipped Daniel's rear bumper. The impact wasn't severe, but it was enough. Daniel's truck began to slide. He fought the wheel, but physics had taken over. His rig was drifting toward the spinning car, toward the jackknifed semi, toward a collision that would involve multiple vehicles. In that moment, Daniel understood. This was the accident. This was how he would die. The warning had been real, and he'd ignored it. Time seemed to slow. Daniel could see every detail with crystal clarity: the terrified face of the driver in the spinning car, the trailer of the other semi swinging toward him like a massive pendulum, the pickup truck that had started the chain reaction, now fishtailing out of control. And then, impossibly, time stopped completely. Everything froze. The spinning car hung motionless mid-rotation. The jackknifing semi was suspended in its death swing. The pickup truck's fishtail was captured like a photograph. Even the deer that had started everything stood perfectly still at the edge of the highway, one hoof raised, caught mid-leap. Only Daniel could move. He could turn his head, could look around. But his truck was frozen too, locked in its trajectory toward disaster. A man appeared in the road ahead. He seemed to materialize out of the frozen air itself. He was dressed in ordinary clothes, jeans, a jacket, work boots. But his face was strange, hard to focus on, like looking at someone through water. The man walked up to Daniel's driver's side window and somehow passed through it, sitting down in the passenger seat without opening the door. "Hello, Daniel," the man said. His voice was calm, almost sad. "What? What is this?" Daniel managed to ask. "This is the moment you were warned about. February 9th, 2023, 5:23 a.m. Mile marker, 88. The accident that would have killed you." The man gestured at the frozen chaos outside. "Would have. Past tense. Because you've already prevented it." "I didn't prevent anything. I'm in the middle of it." "No," the man said gently. "You're experiencing a temporal echo. What you're seeing right now is what would have happened if you'd continued south without stopping at that rest stop, without reading that warning, without making the choice to alter your timeline." Daniel's mind was reeling. "I don't understand." 3 months from now, you're now, February 2023, you will discover that you have the ability to perceive future events. It's rare but not unique. You'll learn to control it, to use it. And one of the first things you'll do is send a warning back to yourself. To this night, you'll post that flyer. At the rest stop, program that digital display. Create this entire scenario to save your own life. That's impossible. It already happened. From your future self's perspective, it happened 3 months ago. You, posted that warning. You ignored it. You continued south. And now you're experiencing the consequences, frozen in this moment before your death, so that your future self can show you why the warning matters. The man stood up and pointed at the frozen scene outside. "If time unfreezes right now, your truck will collide with that semi. The impact will crush your cab. You'll die instantly, but it doesn't have to happen this way. How do I stop it? You already did. The moment you read that warning and felt certainty, that was your future self, reaching back, making you understand at a level deeper than consciousness. You chose to stop at the rest stop. You chose to read the warning. You chose to question it, to hesitate, to slow down. All of those choices created micro-delays that shifted your timeline by crucial seconds. The you that's experiencing this frozen moment is a ghost, an echo, a vision of what almost was. The real you, the living you, is somewhere else." Daniel looked down at his hands on the frozen steering wheel. They seemed less solid suddenly, slightly transparent. "Where am I? The real me? Exactly where you're supposed to be. You took a different exit after leaving the rest stop. You chose Highway 17, the inland route. You listened to that warning after all, even if you didn't consciously admit it. Right now, the real now. You're about 30 miles west of here, safe and alive. wondering why you made that choice. The man smiled. This is just your brain processing what almost happened. A gift from your future self to help you understand how close you came to death and how you saved yourself. Daniel felt himself starting to fade. The frozen scene outside was becoming transparent, like a photograph overexposed to light. The man in the passenger seat was disappearing too. "Wait," Daniel called out. "What happens next? What do I do with this?" "You live, Daniel. You continue driving. And 3 months from now, when you start experiencing visions of the future, you won't question them. You'll trust them. And you'll save yourself again and again, every time danger approaches. You'll become very good at surviving." The world dissolved into white light. Daniel woke up with a start. He was in his truck, parked at a rest stop, but not the one from before. This was a different rest stop, further inland. Highway 17. He checked his GPS. Yes, Highway 17, about 30 miles from I-95. The clock read 5:47 a.m., February 9th, 2023. Daniel looked at his passenger seat. The yellow warning flyer was there, crumpled from where he'd gripped it. He smoothed it out and read it again. "Do not continue south on I-95. Exit at Highway 17. He had exited at Highway 17. He'd made that choice without fully understanding why, driven by instinct or intuition or something he couldn't name. And now he was here, safe, alive, while somewhere on I-95 at mile marker 88, an accident had happened or was happening, or had almost happened, in a timeline that he'd somehow avoided. Daniel picked up his phone and searched for accidents on I-95 South Carolina. The results loaded. Braking, multi-vehicle accident at mile marker 88, I-95 South. 2 fatalities, multiple injuries, highway closed, a void area. Time of accident, 5:23 a.m. Daniel sat in his truck for a long time, shaking, trying to process what he'd experienced. A dream, a vision, a glimpse of an alternate timeline where he'd made a different choice. He pulled out of the rest stop and continued on Highway 17. The route would take longer, but he was alive to drive it. That was what mattered. 3 months later, in May 2023, Daniel began experiencing strange sensations while driving. Moments of absolute certainty about what was going to happen, where an accident would occur, which rest stop to avoid, when to take a different route. He learned to trust these feelings. They were never wrong. He never told anyone about the warning flyer or the frozen moment at mile marker 88. Who would believe it? He barely believed it himself. But he kept that yellow flyer in his truck's glove box, a reminder that time was more flexible than he'd once thought, and that sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get a chance to save yourself from a future that hasn't happened yet. Daniel Okonkwo still drives the eastern seaboard routes. He's never had a serious accident. His safety record is perfect. Other drivers sometimes ask him how he does it, how he always seems to know which routes to take, which rest stops to skip, when to delay his departure by just a few crucial minutes. Daniel just smiles and says he's careful. He follows his instincts. He pays attention. But sometimes, late at night, he stops at rest areas and checks their bulletin boards. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, he sees yellow flyers. Warnings for other drivers. Specific names, specific dates, specific accidents to avoid. Daniel leaves those warnings alone. They're not for him. They're for people who, like him, have future selves trying desperately to save their past selves, creating loops in time, sending messages backward to prevent deaths that haven't happened yet, but will unless someone makes a different choice. The road is dangerous. Accidents happen. People die. But sometimes, If you're very lucky, you get a warning. And if you're wise, you listen. Daniel listened, and that has made all the difference.